My next guest sort of follows on from what I was saying on Friday to do with Luke Mitchell. And well, let's bring her in. I'm sure Jennifer is more than capable of explaining for herself why she's here today. Jennifer Gale, everybody, from the Luke Mitchell campaign. Hello, Jen. How are you?
I'm very well. We've had a very difficult week. We said goodbye to an incredibly brave woman on Thursday. I must say that I've been waiting for this for many years, dreading this for many years, and feeling that what everybody desperately wanted, what Corin desperately wanted, was to see her son free. And we knew years ago that this was unlikely. Her health was deteriorating. But she astounded doctors, she astounded everybody. She hung on, but she was only mortal. She did absolutely astound me. I had years ago thought, oh my goodness, we're really running out of time here. And she was such a, she was incredible. Corin Mitchell was
phenomenal human
incredible.
being. Let me give some background. Corinne Mitchell, as you say, or Corin probably, and I always mispronounce names, so please forgive me. So astonishing. Her son, Luke Mitchell, obviously was convicted of the brutal killing of 14-year-old schoolgirl Jodie Jones in Dalkeith, Midlothian. Subsequent conviction of Luke. And this picture always touches my heart because as a mother, I almost feel I know what she's almost saying to him. It's okay, son. We know this is wrong. We're going to get this sorted. We've got you. That's what that picture feels like to me.
Well, I remember I was writing about how the media were presenting this, and I showed my dad this picture. And my dad really devoured newspapers. Both of my parents did. And he said, I've never seen that picture. And I said, no, you wouldn't. That's not a picture the Scottish media wanted people to see. And the thing is, that day he's interviewed on Sky News, and then there's pictures of him at the grave laying flowers. And then in media reports, they say he hugged his mum for 5 minutes, as though, you're going to your girlfriend's grave. You think it's strange that you'd hug your mum for a bit. But when he stops hugging his mum after that, his face is visibly tear-stained. But they presented that as, he's angry. Because he was angry, because he was obviously aware of the paparazzi, or whatever you want to call them. He was aware that suddenly, I think because they heard other journalists shouting, get back here. So he knows that he's being watched, and that was something they wanted to avoid. And that's something that he encountered that again at his mum's funeral on Thursday. And
that was quite weird to see him, Jen, because I haven't seen him obviously in the intermediate period. And it was quite weird to see him go from this 14-year-old child, right, to a grown man in his 30s. And the problem, there's so many problems about this story. So let's start to unpack the problems about this story. And of course, let me just bring in an image of Jodie, because we must never, ever forget Jodie in this. Jodie is absolutely a victim, just like Luke is, for those who believe in the innocence of Luke Mitchell. And Jodie and Luke, boyfriend and girlfriend, they had arranged to meet. Luke was, I think, on his way to see her. She never showed up. Then they went looking for her. There was a search, and it was Luke who found her body. And that seems to be the best thing that they have, the strongest thing they have to say that he's guilty. Talk to me.
Well, I mean, I would say this is the case that Corin and Luke would put. Sorry, Corinne. I know a Corin, so I'm often doing it as well, actually, even years later. It's terrible. But he got home from school. It was a normal Monday, and he did as he phone records show. It was a very standard Monday. He rang the family business. Corin was self-employed. What do you want me to cook for dinner? She tells him. His gran hands the phone over to her, and she gets back from work about 5:15, and he's made a start on dinner. And then they have dinner, and he goes out to wait for Jodie. And he waits on a very, very busy road. And now at this point, it's a bright Monday. He sees neighbours coming back from work. He waits for a good hour. He waits for a very long time. So a very long time for people to see him. And then she does not have her phone. Unfortunately, it was broken. So the exchange to meet up was a very brief one. She had to get her mum's phone very quickly. And the Crown's case is that 37 minutes after that exchange, he had by that point murdered her. There's so much wrong there, and I hope you'll give me a chance to come to that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, then he goes out and meets friends. And so, it angers me that, as this has been reported, people say she didn't believe. Well, no, people asking her, why haven't you asked your son if he's guilty or not? Well, it doesn't make any sense. Her case has always, until the end of her life, been, I came in from work at 5:15, he was cooking dinner. She's never deviated from that at any point. So it's almost like asking her to ask him, when I came in and you were cooking dinner, were you also committing murder at the same time? It doesn't make sense. It's not a case of faith. It's a case of, he was with me.
Yeah, it's just not a conversation you'd have. It would make absolutely no sense between two people who knew where they were.
No, and I think it's very late that night. He's taking Mia, the German Shepherd, out for her last pee, and he gets a call. Well, first it's a text, and then he rings and says, no, she never met up. But the Crown's case, also Mia was a trained tracker dog. There's so much. I could talk about this forever, but the Crown's case is that 37 minutes after that initial exchange, he has killed her. And he has killed her with a fishing knife, not the fishing knife they took from his house. It's a different one, which has never been. Is there any evidence of two distinct fishing knives? No, there's not.
Right.
He killed her in imitation of a painting. There's no evidence he'd ever seen by a musician whose albums he did not at that time own. He and Jodie, I think, quite liked Marilyn Manson, but they were by no means big fans. Jodie was obsessed with Nirvana. Absolutely.
Right. And actually, she was probably much more of a kind of goth than he was, although he was portrayed that way in media I saw it. I saw the way they portrayed him like some dark satanic creature. He was demonized.
Jodie was an obsessive music fan. It was very sexist. Now, Jodie, you see her there. She adored music. She loved live music. She loved exploring lyrics. She was obsessed with Kurt Cobain. She was quite a rebellious. She sounds amazing. She sounds an absolutely amazing girl. And in order for this to fit, she has to suddenly become this meek thing, And
Exactly.
actually, I think the evidence is that, I think Luke had the best of Nirvana. Jodie would not have had the best of Nirvana. She would have had the whole thing.
Right.
So I think there's certain evidence that it was Jodie that introduced Luke to music. Absolutely, because he liked Eminem. He'd even had the Eminem, the bleach vanilla.
Right.
There was a very popular hairstyle at the time. So no, I think she was the obsessive music fan, absolutely. But the idea that she could have influenced him, oh no, because that wouldn't fit, would it? She has to be reduced, which is, I think, such a disrespectful thing to do. Yes, and the other thing is they say when he was due to cannabis use, despite the fact that he's founder, he has his bloods taken, and he's not high on cannabis. I think he might have had a trace amount, but one of his friends, when he did actually then meet up when she failed to show up, I think they brought about an 11-year-old. So even if he was inclined to smoke cannabis, he probably wouldn't have smoked cannabis with a child.
But so what, though? Cannabis is not linked with being a murderer, right? It's not.
No, exactly. The point is, the Crown's case is that it was cannabis played a part. So you have these three things, and it sounds unbelievable. And I think because that is the Crown's case, there's a sense that we don't want people to look at that because it's ridiculous. I had a year of, I couldn't quite believe that. I thought, no, I couldn't believe my country would do that. Right. I couldn't believe in a case that was so stupid. I kept expecting someone to, reveal something that would make it make sense to me. And it never, 4 years down the line, that's not happened.
Lots of comments coming in, as I'm sure you would expect. And some of them are about the issues of the police. Aquaboy says, I'm Scottish. Police Scotland stitched this boy up. Police destroyed the DNA evidence that proved his innocence. And there is very much, I think I've been covering this story now for about 6 years. And there is very much a strong sense that the police decided it was him. And as we've seen with other cases, certainly I have as an investigative journalist, it's almost like when they decide it's somebody, they will make that case fit. And that's how it fell with Luke, even down to, you mentioned the Sky News. That Sky News report was horrible. That I think they allowed the reporter, didn't they, into the home, into the Mitchell's home. And the way that they stitched him, again, media, police complicity. How significant do you feel is the police role in this, if this is a wrongful conviction? Hugely significant, but I think it's quite hard to separate the kind of media
And the police, I mean, the media want to work with the police. It helps their job to do that. And so there were clear ties there. And Neil Mackay of I think it's the Herald, said that he got a call from a senior police officer, and he'd never in his time ever had a call like this where somebody was saying he is definitely guilty. Never. And then some people on the red top said, "Oh, that's nonsense." And you think, well, Neil Mackay is saying that. I think he's editor-in-chief at the Herald. It'd be a very strange thing for him to say, because he'd be smearing senior police officers. So it's a bit odd. Going back to the Sky News interview, the other thing that I find so maddening, I mean, it really is, it's heartbreaking, but it's also maddening, is in that interview, James Matthews says to Luke, "What's this we hear about burning clothes?" And Luke said, "Oh no, they just said that a female relative of a suspect admitted to burning clothes." James Matthews replies, "And was that you or anyone connected with you?" And Luke says, "No, not that I know of." Everything about his demeanor is, he's not, nothing about that alarms him. And that must be true, because the police must have told him, yes, a female relative of a suspect has admitted to burning clothes, because why else would he say that? And then after Murder in a Small Town came out, and then the police did destroy evidence. And people say, oh, well, they're going to destroy it eventually. No, there's a procedure for these things. We have to know.
Yes.
And this was beforehand. They did, sure enough, find traces of burnt clothes from an address in Mayfield, which is a village not too far from it, but quite a walk. So that was true. So when the police said a female relative has done that, everybody in Scotland saw him say that. Everybody pretty much that had a TV, because everyone was glued to it. And so when this information comes out, you just think there's going to be an awakening, a mass awakening, that people are going to use their critical faculties and do something. And it didn't happen then. It didn't happen, I think when they destroyed evidence, that was front page news. Surely something is going to happen.
Right.
And I think Luke has, I don't know how he stayed sane, because I think throughout his life, he's had these moments where this is going to be it. This is going to be the time.
Oof.
Awful.
Yeah, you mentioned Murder in a Small Town. I think that was a Channel 5 documentary, I think a two-parter. Excellent. And I can be highly critical of kind of output from legacy media, but that was actually excellently documented. But there have been a number of people who have come out and said quite clearly he couldn't possibly have done it. It's so circumstantial. The lack of forensics is extraordinary, given that there was DNA and forensics pertaining to other people at the crime scene, right, Jen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was. And I was asked, I did a podcast a wee while ago, and somebody said to me, oh, well, surely, because a number of names get thrown out there.
Yes.
I don't really want to get into that, because I feel that we need to exonerate Luke. Then we can do that. That's
then
very
they
much
can find who's responsible. Right. Got you.
I mean, that's not what I can say. This stinks. I can say this doesn't make any sense. Look into it, for God's sake. Free Luke Mitchell. Then solving this crime, I think, I would press for that. But this is the order at which I would like to do things. But I was asked, well, clearly none of those names could have matched those samples. And my response to that is, well, hang on. There was a sperm sample that matched Jodie's sister's boyfriend, and they came up with this ridiculous. It's kind of ridiculous.
Wasn't it like the carrying on the jacket or something? Please remind me.
So there were semen patches on the T-shirt.
Right, that's it.
That matched Stephen Kelly, and the police didn't then think, like you would expect, well, maybe go and search his house. Maybe let's see what he was doing. Let's look into this. They said, oh, it must be a transfer from the washing machine. Now that relies on, Jodie didn't live with her sister for one thing, and her sister didn't live with her boyfriend. So this is at the grand's house. So this involves, unless he had really very strong semen, it doesn't really make any sense. But if the police are going to do that, if they're going to excuse somebody that way,
right,
I think they can excuse people in all kinds of ridiculous ways.
Right.
Just apply that in the ways that perhaps I don't know. I mean, but if you can excuse someone that way, you can excuse those other samples in other ridiculous ways that perhaps we don't know about, I think the sample of burnt clothes, for example, they said, oh, it was too far away. I haven't seen that written down, but I've heard that from others. So you're looking for ways to excuse they're frankly ridiculous. So
Right.
I don't think
it doesn't make sense. So essentially, they applied one rule to him that they didn't apply to other potential people who were in the
go
fray.
for him. Yeah.
Yes.
And the FBI also said it was. I mean, I think when the FBI came out and said, Police Scotland approached us for a profile of the killer, we said, you're barking up the wrong tree. The dynamic, the kind of, this was a lust killing, and that's not what you're going to find in a 14-year-old boy. If you just charge someone convenient, you think you can convict, that's disgraceful. That's what the FBI said. And it's just one of those things. These things happen. You expect an outcry, you expect the awakening, and it just doesn't come. So I think it hasn't come within Scotland. So I'm really glad that I'm speaking to you in London.
I'm always happy to talk to because it took me a long time to really understand about this case because like everybody else or like a lot of other people, I bought into the whole idea, the demonization of it. This is a 14-year-old who lost his mind and lost control, all that sort of stuff. And then the more you look into it, the more you realize that it actually doesn't stand up under scrutiny, which is why it so alarms me. I deal with a lot of what I believe to be miscarriages of justice, whether that's Jeremy Bamber, whether it's Lucy Letby, whether it's Luke Mitchell. And there are similar traits, actually. And what I've realized, come to understand, is that the establishment, whether that's Scottish establishment or whether that's the English establishment, does not like to admit its mistakes, especially in situations like this, because that involves unpacking not only so much, but essentially holding other people responsible for this error. And it's not something that any establishment likes to do at all. So Luke has obviously maintained his innocence since the get-go, as indeed did his dear mum, which is why I found it so sad, the fact that her life ended before she was able to see the release of her son. He served his minimum 20-year term. He's had how many appeals is it for?
Loads. I think it is about 4. Yeah.
Nuts.
I think what we really would like to to talk about Corin today, because I think that was something that her suffering in this was, obviously she was campaigning for her son, but I don't think the public know quite what she was put through and what she was put through for her insistence. He's done nothing wrong. He was with me. Because in order for her son to be convicted, she had to be destroyed. Her credibility had to be destroyed.
Yes.
And so charges were brought against her. And I don't know how. I have no idea how they managed to bring those charges of perverting the course of justice, because there's nothing there. There was no evidence of destroying clothes or anything like that. I mean, she'd actually reported Luke to school for smoking cannabis. That came up at the trial.
Right,
She did a difficult thing to do. That's a thing a good mum would do, but very few, I think, would. We don't want to report our kids to the school, but she did it. So I think that says something about her. She said it was a hard thing to do, but she did it. But they said, well, she got him a tattoo when he was 15, therefore she would lie. And you think that's one hell of a leap, isn't it?
Huge.
But she absolutely had to be humiliated and discredited. And then when her charges were dropped, she had no way of defending herself. That avenue, well, let's unpick these charges against me, that the media had been running with for a year. So they've got a really long time to bed in. She's had a year to be made a hate figure. And then when the chance comes to defend herself, charges are dropped. Now, she would have thought, probably, well, that's a good sign. If they're dropping the charges,
right,
then, this would be a good thing. No. So another thing she can do then is take a lie detector test. And she does it in front of the media. I mean, this is an incredibly brave thing to do, who have hounded her and hounded her.
Huge.
Her business has been set fire to countless times. She's been beaten in the prison car park. The Daily Record said this is when she visits her son. This is the kind of car she drives. They know where she lives. About that, So she's running a family business. So she's self-employed. She can't be signed off work. Under the strain of all of this, she has to keep going. And so her health is obviously just destroyed by that, because she ends up losing everything. So Luke's family home gone, family business burnt down repeatedly. It's essentially just a shell that his mum ends up living in. There's no running water, there's no electricity, broken glass. So in winter, she's essentially exposed to the elements. She lights fires inside to just keep warm, which then destroys her lungs. She also, there seems to be no pity. I don't understand how on earth that's possible, but people would break in. She couldn't ring the police very easily for obvious reasons, because why on earth would she have any trust in the police?
That's right.
She does, I think, sometimes because she has to, but she kept on going. And I think Luke actually saved her life, because I believe he brought about Murder in a Small Town in some way, I think. And people saw how she was living, and I think if they hadn't, she would have died long before. So he's had to wake up for many, many years wondering if his mum's still alive, because she was living in those conditions.
Terrible.
Yeah, I have so much admiration for Corin, and I think the last years of her life, I'm grateful that she was cared for in the last few years of her life. If she had passed away around about the time that Murder in a Small Town came out, it would have been more heartbreaking, I think. At least she had hope.
There was some kind of validation with that documentary, but like you say, she had hope, but there have been a lot of false dawns, haven't there? So, and that is, I mean, in yourself, and obviously this is just your opinion, we don't know this medically, we can't fact check this, but in yourself, your own understanding, do you feel what has happened to Luke and then what happened to her hastened her death in any way?
I think that, yes, if she would still be alive.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, her mum worked until she was in her 90s. She worked full time up until her 90s. Corinne's mum did. No, she would still be alive. That's my belief. You can't prove it, but you can definitely see a kind of causal link.
Yes.
You live in poverty. What's that going to do to your health? The stress of it. All of this, you know, of course. I think, yeah, that this killed her.
Yeah, it's going to have an impact, definitely. DJ Mark says, may she now rest in peace. And that's why it is important to continue the conversation, because this is her legacy. Her legacy is that she knew her son to be innocent because she was his witness to that. And I think it's interesting. I think reporting the cannabis to school, not my daughter doesn't smoke cannabis, never has, but I certainly wouldn't have been one to report it. But I think that actually is interesting, because if she reported to school, then she's hardly going to cover up a murder for her child, right? I think in that respect, you know. And let me read you some of these comments. This is such a wicked case, says Sass1. Praying for Luke and rest in peace, Corin. Catherine Hutton says, deepest sympathies to Luke and all who have lost the biggest advocate in the fight for justice. Rest in peace, Corin. Simon says he was a teenager and they stitched him up. Marie says, rest in peace, Corin. And Stephen points out the police are good at framing people. Remember Barry George, indeed, although I think he's been recently charged again about something else completely different. But Barry George, of course, in prison for 8 years, falsely accused of murdering Jill Dando. And it is very concerning to me, Jen, about the sheer volume of people I believe are inside because it was an easier case to make for the police. But I don't believe that Luke's was an easy case to make. That's the thing. That's what doesn't make any sense, right? So what can we do? There are supporters in our chat who would like to do something. What are you up to now in terms of Luke? Is there another appeal? Anything at all moving forward? Because as I say, this is surely Corinne's legacy if we all carry on her good work.
Well, I mean, there's a crowdfunder. Legal team have, we managed to get over the first hurdle, and that wasn't easy. I remember thinking, great, we funded the first part of this legal team that could at least write to the I think it's the Crown Office to say, don't destroy any more samples because they were due to be destroyed this year. And I had this terrible, terrible fear late last year that they would conveniently not get the letter. They would wait till like the 1st of January and go, right, because then they could legitimately do it. And so he wrote that letter was written at the end of the year, and they said, yes, we've got it. We won't destroy anything else. And then I think just a lot of admin, because this has been looked at so many times. And I don't think the new legal team inherited something that wasn't particularly organized, put it that way. But they have now done the work. So, I mean, we know that there are samples within that. For example, I mentioned that, Jodie's hands were tied, and there's a sample there. But it's really, it's very, very difficult because I think we only really get one shot at it. And I think there's this fear, because we have no trust in why should we have trust in the police? That
no.
We want the right people to do this. We want people we trust to do this. We don't want, to give it to the, I think we'd worry that there might be someone somewhere that would just conveniently destroy that sample. It sounds ridiculous.
Well, no, it doesn't sound ridiculous because it's actually based on proven information that has happened before. Samples were destroyed. This is not you being ridiculous. This is you being realistic and trying to.
Yes.
Yeah, you're trying to preserve the evidence, for goodness sake. The other thing that I think is quite slightly problematic, and I don't know if it works the same in Scotland as it does in England, but there is an issue of people who deny their guilt, is that they are not paroled. Is it the same thing? Because it's a catch-22, isn't it? Because he's saying, I didn't do this. He said it right from the beginning. Does that then preclude him from getting parole in Scotland?
Well, they would say, oh, no. But so they would say in practice, yes, it can do, because they're looking for somebody who's done rehabilitation courses.
Right.
So yes, they would deny that, but the evidence would suggest that isn't, what we're seeing with Luke is not the case. He was convicted without limit of time. Now, I would have thought up until that point, and actually until quite recently, that you could not hold a child indefinitely, because he's 14, for God's sake. Don't you believe in rehabilitation? But in Scotland we can. You could hold a child indefinitely, and I don't think he's the only one I've heard. So yes, because he will not admit to something he has not done, then the various programs are not being gone through. I mean, he's in shots with the most violent offenders in Scotland and has been for a very long time.
Right.
But his parole hearing went very well. I mean, he you have a job within the prison. There's nothing has been raised of any concern. Unfortunately, I think I mentioned earlier that the press did turn up to his mother's funeral. Unfortunately, that information was leaked, and then because I think, as I say, the case is so ridiculous. I mean, what I have said, and everybody, I urge you to look it up, and don't just take my word for it, but look it up. You will find it's true. And that's why I think character assassination is so valuable to the media that were complicit. They want to justify it because they know that they don't want to focus on what put him in jail. They want the character assassination. So anything they can get has great currency in Scotland, unfortunately. And the people who leaked that knew that. And imagine being the kind of person that would have that and wait for his mum's funeral to do that. And I think if Karen had worried about that, I think a lot of us would say, oh, no one would do that.
Right. Well, unfortunately, human beings can be unpredictable at best. Points out an issue that I often raise because it does deeply concern me, and that is if Luke Mitchell is innocent, and I think I said that at the start anyway, then it means that there are likely guilty people walking around, which is actually a danger to the public. And so why the police aren't prepared to go at this? Well, we know why. We absolutely know why. I just want to make one more point because a lot of people aren't aware of this. And that was actually when you go right back from to the beginning, when he was interviewed by police, he didn't have a representative, did he, at one stage? I mean, because that's the issue, isn't it? About, was it the Cadder argument that
Peter Cadder. Thanks to Peter Cadder. I think only Peter Cadder, young people in Scotland who are being interviewed on a Section 20, oh God, I can't remember which one it is, but yes, said that you couldn't interview a child, interrogate a child without legal representation, which just seems obvious, and he had to take that to London. And I think the judges in London were astonished that people thought this was okay to deny legal representation, but they did. It's actually people who are victims of the justice system that seem to be the people that fix it.
Exactly.
It's not the people within it. It's not the people who are embroiled in that. They seem to accept it. So unfortunately, I don't think. I mean, Luke Mitchell's defence, a man called Donald Finlay, is very well known up here, and I think he wasn't the type to challenge the establishment. I think the person that would have saved Luke was somebody who knew that. Yeah, he was such an establishment figure, and I don't think he would. He was not going to protect Luke ahead of his
Same old story. Monica says, poor lad. Ashley says, justice for Luke and Jodie. And I would actually now add also justice for Corinne as well, for everything that she's all been through and had to deal with. Before you leave us, Jen, any last words?
I mean, as I say, we keep thinking that something is going to change. There will be a great awakening, and we really do need help outside of Scotland. And this case is very, very well known in Scotland. It's very divisive, even though the case itself, which I outlined, is absolutely ridiculous. I think it makes fools of us all. So I'm very, very grateful to anyone outside of Scotland who looks at this and supports this and shares this. I think sometimes you need people outside the Scottish establishment to really will make that difference. In Scotland, we find that, Wings Over Scotland was what did for Peter Murrell. He's a Scot, but he's based in Bath, and he said that was a lot to do with it.
Right.
So we do need your help. So, but please share the crowdfunder, and please keep your eye on the updates from the crowdfunder, because that's where you will find them. And yes, I just thank you for having me on, having a chance to say this, because it really is very, very difficult. I never thought it would be this difficult to just tell the truth, but the layers of complexity and confusion are sown, and it makes it so difficult to do what we're doing. And yes, also remember Corin.
And commiserations to all of you who were also involved with her and are also dealing with your grief over the loss of Corin as well. So
Luke was very protective of his mom. I never got to meet her because he initially said yes, and then he was just so worried. She was so protective and loving of him, but he was also as protective and loving of his mom. And when he said she's too unwell, I respected that absolutely. So I saw nothing but a son who desperately worried for his mother. And yeah, so yeah, it is heartbreaking.
I just have to mention this because I think you already did, though. But Jacqueline said, "Are you going to mention Jodie's brother?" Did you not already mention that?
I didn't mention Jodie's brother. But I did say that we want to
focus on.
It makes it very difficult. I would love, put it this way, I would love to, but I think.
Is there a legal issue?
Distraction.
Right, but just because obviously now I've just opened that can, I just have to could you just briefly tell us what that issue is?
Well, when Murder in a Small Town came out, there were a number of suspects mentioned, and they said the number one suspect they couldn't mention. And that was then taken down because Joseph Jones' name appeared on the monitor.
Right.
So he wasn't mentioned during that documentary.
Right.
We do have to be very careful, as I say, because I think people want to solve this crime and then it makes it more complicated. And I often want to drill down and say, look, Luke's conviction is absurd. But there's a temptation because it's incredibly interesting. And I know absolutely why she asked that question. I get it completely. But you can then spin off into a whole other world when you go down there.
Yeah, absolutely got you. What we need right now is justice for Jodie Jones, for Luke Mitchell, and for Corin Mitchell. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Jen. Jen Gale from the Luke Mitchell campaign. They are doing sterling work. Please support them. All the links are already in the description, peeps. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourself, Jen.
Okay, bye.
Bye.